of our involvement in mega green projects, technologies, and also initiatives. CEO and Business Leaders Summit is not only a gathering of business leaders to discuss issues, but also a catalyst for establishing strategic alliances and discussing new opportunities. It's also a venue to find out what's happening in the world, and also the business opportunities that's coming in the coming years. It's also a launch pad for green projects, green technologies, and initiatives. And also it's a platform for companies involved in green projects and technologies to meet potential partners and investors. And lastly, CEO and Business Leaders Summit is also a gathering of friends. Some of you we've worked with for many years, some of you we haven't met for quite a few years. And we are all here to make the world a better place. So to set the tone, I'd like to give you a brief introduction in terms of what we do. Our mission, as you know, is to help create more sustainable cities worldwide by providing a framework focusing on cost-effective solutions. And over the past decade, we've been involved in a lot of things. We've advised thousands of decision makers around the world, both political and business. We've conducted a lot of green project tours. We are sitting on the steering committee of the United Nations World Urban Campaign. We get invited to virtually all the major summits in the world, and we've received a lot of honors and awards for what we've done. And every year we also support quite a few major meetings and events, and we also do a few of our own. And also we had the privilege not only to meet thousands of major decision makers, both political and business, but also had the privilege to meet a lot of world leaders and share our ideas. And I like this cartoon. Yeah, there's actually a few ways to look at it, but one interesting way to look at it is the issues of climate change. When you think about it, when we're addressing the issue of climate change, it also brings a lot of benefits, not only in terms of reducing carbon pollution, but it's, we're talking about energy independence, we're talking about preserving the rainforest, preserving biodiversity. It's about green jobs, creating livable cities and livable communities, about increasing renewable energy, clean water, clean air, and healthier future generations. And I'd like to briefly go through our framework and our green city criteria. First thing to consider is obviously sustainable land use, about land use policy and all these other things, eco-master planning and so forth, and creating more green space. And one thing I'd like to touch on is that an overuse of resources and planning errors. For example, in China, you probably know, and we've worked with over 50 cities in China, there's a lot of places where they have so-called ghost towns or ghost cities. There's an overuse, there's a planning error essentially. And one estimate is quite scary actually, that if all the planning submissions actually come into fruition in China alone, there's actually enough dwellings for 3.4 billion people. China's population is the largest in the world, and it's 1.3 billion. Yeah, so it's actually enough dwelling for 2.5 times that amount. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing is basically an overuse of resources. And this particular stat actually scared the hell out of Bill Gates, because China in the past, between the year 2011 and 2013, 2014, within a 2.5 year period, used more concrete than the United States ever did in its entire 20th century, in 100 years. And it actually surpassed that by 150%. Yeah? Of course, a lot of it goes to useful infrastructure, but a lot of it actually goes to build wasteful infrastructure too, and so forth. Second thing I'd like to touch on is eco-buildings. I mean, this is a conference, a summit by itself, talking about green buildings and green and eco-buildings. Creating better green building rating tools, BIM, information modeling, sitting and structural design efficiency, and so forth. Water efficiency, IEQ, and so forth. Third thing I'd like to quickly touch on is increasing the percentage of renewable energy and energy efficiency in cities and communities. It's about optimizing the overall percentage of renewable energy and minimizing the overall CO2 emissions from energy production, and also utilizing smart grid. I'd like to bring a few important points. The IEA, International Energy Agency, of all people, actually stated that the world, if we transition towards a renewable energy economy, the world will save $71 trillion. Not billion, but $1 trillion. Yep. So this is one thing to consider. And the second thing I'd like to bring up is basically every minute, and it's actually something that's actually from IMF, of all people, IMF, every minute the world actually spends $10 million on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine. And a bit of good news, a lot of, as you know, the amount of solar installation is increasing quite exponentially in many parts of the world. Fourth point, very important too, clean air. It's not only about reducing CO2 emissions, but also nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and also VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And I think some of you have seen this picture before. It's a picture of Beijing during the good days and the bad days. And actually, clean air is actually easier to solve than water issues and soil contamination, because China has done that, Beijing has done that. During the Olympics, it basically ordered the factories, most of the polluting factories, to close down, and half of the cars to stop running. They did the same thing again last year during APEC, and that's why they call it APEC Blue. And they did the same again this year during the parade, when you actually order the factories to stop running, and the polluting factories, and have cleaner cars. You can actually stop this issue quite quickly and solve this issue quite quickly. And actually, it's not a problem for China alone. For example, another thing I'd like to bring up, which is not in this slide, just a couple of years ago, out of the world's top 20 cities in terms of air pollution, top 20 cities, 16 of them were in China. Last year, out of the world's top 20 cities in terms of air pollution, zero were in China. It doesn't mean Chinese cities are clean, it just means that other cities have gone up in terms of pollution. India, for example, has 13 of the top 20 most polluted cities in terms of air quality. Water management, a very big issue too, a conference by itself, and it's about creating better water sustainability policy, management regimes, and so forth. And also, more hydro-neutral, water-efficient buildings. And I think some of the speakers will be covering this too. Waste management, very important too. Creating an integrated waste collection, resource recovery, reuse, and disposal policy. And one thing I'd like to quickly touch on is about industrial ecology, where the toxic byproducts of one facility becomes the raw material of another. So creating business park industrial zones that actually takes this into consideration is the next step for the future. And I think Denmark is pretty good in that regards, but right now I think not many parts of the world is actually really thinking along this line yet. Sanitation and health, creating an integrated sanitation, waste, and management policy. And also in terms of population access, there's a difference between availability and accessibility. Many top medical facilities are actually available too in poorer countries, lesser developed countries, but it's only accessible to a small percentage of the population. Number 8, environmental management, integrating development planning and environmental protection policy. And one interesting quote is from the head of TNC, is that society is defined not only by what it creates, but what it refuses to destroy. Yeah? It's a quote actually, it's not, he didn't actually create it, actually created by the great Indian emperor Ashoka, 2,500 years ago. He already said the same thing. Not only he said things like that, but he also created animal hospital, animal rights, and a lot of other things. So imagine, even 2,500 years ago, people were already thinking in a very progressive way. And unfortunately, Even today, in many parts of the world, people are not actually thinking on this line yet in terms of animal rights and other things. And number 9, green transportation. A lot of things to cover in terms of, I think quite a few speakers will be speaking on this too, creating integrated urban transport policy and management regime. And lastly, creating a green economy, better green investment policies, green benefit economic modeling, creating more green leases, and so forth. And some of you might wonder, why is it not happening at a quicker pace? Because I think one thing that we sometimes forget is the power of lobbyists. For example, in the US, they done a study, and it's quite a well-known study. They studied 200 of the top lobbying companies in the US, only 200 of the top, and they spent about $5-something billion in lobbying, but they got back in return about 4.4 billion in terms of subsidies. Sorry, yeah. Imagine a 750 times return in terms of return on investment. Yeah, and that's why sometimes things don't happen, because there's things playing behind what we know of. And lastly, how do we normally add value? Well, we help in terms of spreading our Green City framework. We help introduce leading experts to many communities and projects. We introduce advanced green technologies to help with certain projects. We give them ideas on how to attract more investments, and also help them with international recognition, because over the past decade, we've built up a big database of influential political and business decision makers around the world. And this is a quote that we made quite a few years ago. I won't read it, I'll just let you guys read it. Yep, and imagine if everyone was this passionate about things that actually really matter. Yep. So, thank you, and let me introduce you to our next speaker. She probably doesn't need any introduction. Most people would know her. Our Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to welcome you to this important conference and say what an inspirational introduction you just got, and how I hope that the conference is very worthwhile for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to welcome you to Sydney and talk a bit about Sydney. A lot of the things that you mentioned are very high priorities for us. So I'd like to acknowledge all the distinguished guests who are here, and I'd like to acknowledge the original custodians of our land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and acknowledge the people of the 200 nationalities who live here in our city. So I think many of you here today would agree that urbanisation is one of the most effective and responsible ways to address the key challenges of the 21st century. For the first time in history, over half the world's population live in our cities, and the proportion is growing. By 2050, it's estimated that it will be 70%. Already in Australia, it's 60%. 2/3 of our people live in our cities, our major cities. The historical trend in Sydney to leave the city and move to the suburbs once you've had children is changing, and it's started to change in the last 10 years. And the City of Sydney has done sustained work in this area to increase the livability of the city. We've seen the trend reverse, and parents are now choosing to stay rather than to leave the city when they have their families. In 2031, the number of families in the city will increase by 45%. The city has balanced the need to provide homes for future populations and the protection of existing heritage areas by focusing new developments in former industrial areas, such as Central Park, the former CUB site on Broadway, Harold Park, and Green Square. We can't keep developing our food basin in Sydney, and urban development is critical to the future of our city, but it needs to be done right. At the city, we're showing how it can work well by providing new infrastructure and stunning public facilities for our new communities. Doing urban living well means sustainable developments, convenient access to employment, improved infrastructure, quality open space, easy access to local shops, a rich cultural life, and buildings guided by principles of design excellence. We not only need to be providing homes for our residents, floor space for business and hotels for visitors, we also have a responsibility to create places that our community can make connections in and be offered a diversity of experiences. We're well ahead of our work to create Sydney's newest and biggest urban area, Green Square, which will have 61,000 new residents by 2030. Our commitment from the start has been to get the provision of streets and public spaces and community facilities right. We've committed $540 million for roads, for stormwater, for footpaths and for street furniture and community facilities, including childcare, a new library and plaza, new parks and playgrounds, an aquatic centre, affordable housing and creative spaces. We recognised early that there was going to be a need for mass transit in an area, and that was becoming urgent. We've led the campaign by investigating and developing the feasibility of light rail for Green Square. We invested more than $40 million to purchase the key properties on the corridor, and we're making sure that new drainage, power and water supplies under the roads don't conflict with future space needed for tramways. And we've negotiated with major developers to deliver parts of the transit corridor as a developer contribution. It's terrific that the current Transport Minister has recognised the need for light rail in the area, and city staff are now working with Transport for New South Wales to assess funding models and route options. Our approach in Green Square is symbolic of our overall approach to city making. When I became Lord Mayor in 2004, I wanted a plan that would continue no matter who was in Town Hall, who was here in Macquarie Street, or indeed who was in Canberra. So we undertook the largest ever community consultation of the city's history, with residents, with business, with government and statutory authorities, with visitors and with educational and cultural institutions. Interestingly, 97% of people told us they wanted us to take action on climate change. This is back in 2007. They also said they wanted a city, 2006. They also said they wanted a city with a strong economy, one that supports the arts, and connects people to each other into the world. Hence, green, global and connected. We've stuck to our plan. It was never going to be go into the bottom drawer, like so many other visions, to be forgotten and go to dust. It guides everything we do, and we test all our proposals against it. At the city, we consult, we do the research, we make the commitment, and then we do the work. High quality urban environments, with their proximity to parks and open spaces, cultural experiences, retail diversity, attract residents, tourists, and young, mobile 21st century workforce. Sydney's in competition with other global cities for these workers and visitors, and our experience shows that a city that's appealing to residents is also a place that attracts workers, tourists and investors. Since 2004, we've completed over 250 projects, including parks and playgrounds, childcare, pools, libraries, theatres, community and cultural spaces. We're now working on 370 projects as part of our 10-year plan. We've approved around $25 billion worth of high-quality development, and significant urban renewal is underway. We actively encourage design excellence in private development and in our own public projects. City experts work closely with developers to guide outcomes, including public benefits, where appropriate, like childcare centres, public art, creative space, and end-of-trip facilities for cyclists. Major development projects are required to go through a competitive design process. It's the only statutory pre-DA system for private land in the world, and it's paid for by floor space bonus. It's provided an enormous boost to the quality of architecture, to public art and landscape design in our city. Congestion costs Sydney $5 billion a year. By 2020, if it was business as usual, it would soar to $8 billion. So after 16 frustrating years of inaction by the former government here in the state, we did our own research at the city, with the best minds in transport and city design, including the internationally renowned urbanist Jan Gill, to develop a transport policy to address worsening congestion. Now most of our transport policies are reflected in the current state government's own transport strategy. The key project is the 1.6 billion 12-kilometre light rail line connecting Randwick and Kingsford in the southeastern Circular Quay. The city has committed $220 million to the public domain elements of the project. Within our own jurisdiction, we initiated a separated destination-based bike network to provide a viable transport option for those who want to ride, and we are improving pedestrian links and advocating for pedestrians to be given better priority over through traffic. Each year, we invest more than $34 million in the cultural life of our city through sponsorship of internationally renowned festivals and events, and in public art that surprises and delights, including our Eora Journey, a cultural trail that recognises the continuing Aboriginal presence in our city. Millions of people watch our festivals and events and New Year's Eve fireworks and the Chinese New Year Festival, which of course, as you would probably all know, is the biggest outside Asia, to name just a few of those festivals that we run. In the next 10 years, we'll invest $500 million on a range of cultural initiatives, including new facilities. We led the campaign to allow small bars in New South Wales, introduced food trucks to Sydney, provided our own properties for subsidised live workspaces, creative hubs and showrooms for our young creatives and tech startups. Since 2004, our work has fundamentally changed our city and contributed to spectacular growth, boosting the economy. Sydney is a major driver of the national economy. Our 26 square kilometres generates over $108 billion each year to the state and federal governments, accounts for 8% of the national GDP and 22% of the state's economy. Our local government area is one of the state's fastest growing residential areas, and in the 5 years leading up to 2011, 2,000 new businesses opened, with more than 50,000 new jobs created across the city. That job growth represented almost 40% of the entire job growth in the metropolitan area, and it was double the rate of the rest of Sydney. It's all the more remarkable that this growth occurred during the global constraints imposed by the global financial crisis. And what's really interesting is that many of these jobs are in our village areas. You don't need to look far for the causes of this growth. It comes from the knowledge economy as a whole, from professional services, from the creative industries and the education sector, and growth in digital economy and software. We have 15% of all Australia's information, communication and technology jobs here, and 13% of all creative and performing arts jobs. The concentration is even higher in the digital sector, with, for example, 60% of Australia's internet publishing jobs based in our area. We also have the highest concentration of startup companies, and we're keen to encourage more. Our draft Tech Startup Actions Plan outlines the steps we can take to support and encourage the startup community, and how we can increase access for investment, talent, and skilled support network. In a huge vote of confidence in the governance, management and facilities provided by the city, as well as the transformative effect of the light rail project being undertaken by the New South Wales Government, Central Sydney has hit an all-time high in building activity. Developers have lobbed up applications and concept plans with the city for projects valued at a record $7.45 billion just this year, an increase of more than 64% on the previous year's record of $4.5 billion. About half the new development applications are for significant projects in the city, the CBD, the centre of the city, with others concentrated in surrounding urban renewal areas, including Green Square, Harold Park and Erskineville. Sydney's growing popularity with tourists and business travellers has seen owners and operators lodge applications to build 20 new hotels, adding more than 2,300 rooms, and there are preliminary discussions underway for a further 5 hotel projects of varying sizes. This array of projects will accommodate and generate additional jobs, bringing more industries and attracting new investors to our continually improving city centre. And though our economy is thriving, the future of our city is under threat. The greatest risk cities face is climate change, and while we need strong national and international commitments to tackle climate change, the city has not been waiting. We have taken action. Our work shows that more ambitious targets are possible and compatible with strong economic growth, and I think that is another of it. And that's the argument we can use to those naysayers. And I'll just repeat it. Our work shows that ambitious targets are possible and compatible with strong economic growth. And I've just shown you the strong economic growth. We've set a goal of 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions based on 2006 levels for our city government area. The target's backed by a suite of innovative master plans. We have an energy efficiency master plan to reduce energy usage by over 33% by 2030, almost half our target, and save residents and businesses over $200 million. Our renewable energy master plan shows how Sydney could be powered 100% by renewable energy by 2030. Our other master plans have been developed for advanced waste treatment, climate change adaptation and local water provision. We are making good progress towards our targets. We've reduced our own greenhouse emissions by 23%. Next year it will reach 26%. And in 2007 we were the first carbon neutral government in Australia. Greenhouse emissions across our local government area have fallen by 12% at the same time as we've enjoyed a period of strong economic growth. So it's 23% for our own operations, it's 12% right across the city. Our carbon intensity, the amount of greenhouse emissions for each dollar of economic output, has fallen by almost 30%. Partnerships are essential for us to reach our goals. Our Better Building Partnership includes the leading public, private and institutional landlords that collectively own more than 50% of the city's commercial office space. This group works collaboratively to improve the sustainability of their buildings, so far delivering a 35% reduction in emissions since 2006, and they've saved their shareholders $30 million. The city is an active member of the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. This was established in 2005 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address climate risks and impacts. The C40 group is made up of 75 cities, contributes 25% of the global GDP, it represents 1 in 12 people worldwide, and has taken over 8,000 actions to combat climate change. I'm really proud to say Sydney's right in there as a C40 city doing this work. And I think this is also very important. Forward-thinking cities, like forward-thinking businesses, see climate leadership not only as a matter of necessity, but as a source of competitive advantage. We intend to keep Sydney in the forefront. So thank you for inviting me to do a welcome, and I hope your summit encourages new inspiration and ideas, because that's what we really need. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for joining.